Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Dear all SOGP members, viewers, and healthcare providers, it is a great pleasure and honor for me as a president of SOGP to welcome you all today on this webinar on antenatal care and management of anemia in pregnancy. As all of you know that due to this COVID pandemic, the SOGP has adapted and shifted to new innovative mode of professional development of virtual meetings and symposiums. So we have arranged all these virtual meetings, webinars, and SOGP virtual symposium. I hope everyone will get benefit from these webinars and SOGP symposium. I am very thankful to all the speakers and moderators for giving their precious time to this webinar. And at the end, I am very thankful to the Sami Pharmaceutical Company for helping us in organizing this webinar. Thank you so much.
The moderator for the session, Madam Professor Sayyida Batul Mazhar. Madam Batul is a graduate of King Edward Medical College, Lahore. She did her fellowship of Royal College and FCPS from Pakistan CPSP. She is currently the chairperson of Obegin Center, Maternal and Child Health Center, PIMS, Islamabad. She is Pro Vice Chancellor of Shaheed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto University. Madam is past Dean of Nursing and Allied Dean Surgical and Allied Dean Shaheed Zulfikar Ali Bhutto University. She is chairperson of Rawalpindi chapter of SOGP. She is past chief editor of Annals of PIMS. She is currently the editor of JSAFOMS, which is the Menopause Society Journal for Southeast Asia. Madam had a keen interest in academics and research with more than 60 national and international publications. I'm very glad and fortunate to have Madam Batul to moderate the session today. And I'm really sorry for not being live on Facebook and for the initial problems in the technology. Over to you, Dr. Batul, for running the webinar.
Thank you, Halima.
Here on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Halima, for a very kind introduction. It is my honor and privilege to be a moderator for this particular workshop, which is a pre-symposium webinar. And the theme of this webinar is antenatal care, risk assessment, and optimization, with special reference to anemia in pregnancy and prevention tips. I'm very honored and privileged to have a chairs, and as is true for the national character of SOGP, we have people representatives from the various provinces of Pakistan. It is my privilege to introduce Professor Roshan Ara Qazi. She's one of the chairs. She's the chairperson of Hyderabad chapter. She's a former executive member of the Hyderabad chapter. She's professor at Indus Medical College, and she has a keen interest in creating public awareness through writing materials and talks. She has special interest in high-risk pregnancy management and subfertility management. She's author of a public awareness book in 3 languages and has more than 30 publications in national and international journals. I would like to welcome her. The next chair is from People's Medical University, Nawabshah, Professor Farida Vigan, a very, very dynamic person who's the Dean Faculty of Surgery and Allied in her university. She's executive member of the SOGP. She's Director Student Affairs, and she's the head of Department of OBGYN. Welcome, Professor Farida Vigan. It is my honor and privilege to introduce Professor Dr. Sadakat Jabin. She is ex-head of Department OBGYN, Lady Reading Hospital, Peshawar. She is Vice President of the SOGP from KP, ex-chairperson of Peshawar chapter of SOGP, member and secretary of Faculty of Obstetrics 2019. She is also an examiner of CPSP, and she is the chief editor of Journal of Postgraduate Medical Institute. Welcome, Professor Sadakat Jabin. We have Professor Dr. Huma Qudusi as one of the chairs, and she's the president of Society of OBGYN Multan chapter. She is editor of the Journal of SOGP Pakistan. She is also coordinator of the National Program for Lactation Management, as well as in the she is an associate member of Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists. She is author of multiple national publications and international presentations to her credit, and she is the head of department in Nishtar Medical College, University, Multan. We are very privileged that we have two excellent speakers who will be talking about very important subjects. And the reason I think we would like to thank SOGP for choosing this particular webinar, because we know that globally 62% of pregnant women receive WHO recommended 4 antenatal visits, and they still showed fairly high perinatal mortality rates, and the WHO has changed the sequence and number of visits, and that is why we want to talk about antenatal care and its impact on the maternal and fetal outcome. So our first speaker is Professor Shamsa Humayun. She is chairperson and head of OBGYN Fatma Jinnah Medical University. She is Dean Surgery and Allied at Fatma Jinnah Medical University, Lahore. She is director of Medical Education Department of her university. She is vice president of the SOGP Pakistan. She's a faculty member of CPSP, and she is vice president Punjab Association of FJ Old Graduates. She's a medical educationist and a master trainer of also for CPSP. She has a special interest in medical education and reproductive endocrinology. And we are privileged that she's going to speak on antenatal care. What is the current recommendation? How and how much? Thank you, Dr. Shamsa, for joining us. Please go ahead with the presentation.
Dr. Batul has just told us that antenatal care is such an important step in the life of a woman, and this care directly affects on the feto-maternal outcome. So what the antenatal care is? It is comprehensive health supervision of a pregnant woman from conception till delivery. So antenatal care is not only the visits, but it is a continuous process which just initiates the moment patient she had her pregnancy test positive. Until delivery, rather post delivery, advice can also be given during the antenatal period. So what are the objectives? Why a woman needs supervision during antenatal period? ये डॉक्टर सादिया यहाँ क्यों आके मेरे ऊपर खड़ी हो गई? इनको जरा नीचे करो ये वाली. So the objectives are to reduce इनकी window. So to reduce maternal and perinatal mortality and morbidity rates. To improve the physical and mental health of women and children. So it has two objectives. It's not only the reduction in maternal and perinatal mortality, but it brings about improvement in the physical and mental health of both the newborn as well as the pregnant lady. So what is the significance? Why we need that? It ensures the pregnant woman and her fetus are in the best possible health. It is important for early detection and treatment of complications. It gives us then an opportunity to educate the couple for parenthood, and it also gives us the window to prepare the woman for labor, lactation, and care of her newborn. So what we are supposed to do on every antenatal visit? It is the assessment which comprises of always start with the gold standard history, later on examination on the basis of this history, and after history and examination we have to plan and give a list of investigations to detect any problem and for the further management or further intervention. So as we know, it's not the history of present pregnancy. It has much more in that. Past obstetrical history, menstrual history, medical and surgical history, family history, and personal history. So on the basis of this history and examination, we have to categorize the patient, that if patient is low risk or high risk. The main hallmark of antenatal care is to risk categorize so that you can place the low risk women separate, and more attention and more focusing should be done on the high risk patients. So once we have taken the history, then comes the examination. I have just put the slide of weight gain because I'm going to touch upon the important aspects of antenatal care. If patient has a height of over 150 centimeter, this indicates, it directly indicates that she has an average size pelvis from where an average size baby can pass. So we can counsel the patient, we can tell her that there are more chances that she can have a normal vaginal delivery, provided every other thing goes normal or according to our expectations. The approximate weight gain during pregnancy is 12 kg. A woman should gain 2 kg in the first 20 weeks and then 10 kg in the remaining 20 weeks. Or a rough estimation is 1.5 kg per week weight gain until term is appropriate, and it is along with other parameters. This is another parameter to assess that pregnancy is going well and fetus is growing according to our expectations. Because this is the most common question, am I gaining weight, if my weight gain is okay. So abdominal palpation, another very pertinent question, and most of the trainees, they are confused. Do we have to do abdominal palpation, the old or the gold standard method of assessing the gestational age? So the recommendations are that one should not change to Simpson's fundal height measurement if in your setup abdominal palpation is used for the assessment of fetal growth. So this means that Simpson's fundal height कोई बहुत ज़्यादा आपको extra information नहीं देती, and especially the single measurement has very less significance. So if you are used to it, you are accustomed कि आप हाथ से कर रहे हैं fundal height assessment, तो आप उससे abdominal palpation से keep on doing the fetal assessment. फिर एक और जो है fetal heart sounds. You can hear fetal heart sound सोनिक एड से 10 हफ्ते की प्रेगनेंसी में आप सुन सकते हैं, और fetal जो स्टेथोस्कोप है 20 वीक ऑनवर्ड प्रेगनेंसी में आप you can use this. A normal fetal heart rate is from 120 to 160 beats per minute. आप OPD में you can use सोनिक एड और साथ peanuts fetal stethoscope can be used. Then fetal movements. ये भी एक बहुत ही कंट्रोवर्शियल चीज़ होती है, बहुत ही कंफ्यूजिंग चीज़ होती है, कितनी मूवमेंट्स होनी चाहिए, हाउ यू कैन एडवाइज योर पेशेंट के वो रिकॉर्ड रखे फीटल किक काउंट का. सो द प्रेग्नेंट वुमन रिपोर्ट्स एटलीस्ट 10 मूवमेंट्स इन 12 hours, which is considered normal, and absence of fetal movements precedes intrauterine fetal death by 48 hours. तो अगर एक पेशेंट आपको कंप्लेन करती है कि मुझे फीटल मूवमेंट्स फील नहीं हो रही, that should always be taken seriously, and one has to ascertain the fetal well-being by all the available means. अगर आपके पास सोनिक एड है उससे सुन लें. CTG is a better option depending upon what is the duration of her pregnancy, और फिर ultrasound. Investigations, क्या baseline investigations करानी चाहिए on first antenatal visit, and then later on depending upon the reports available आपने क्या चीज़ repeat करानी क्या नहीं करानी. One should always know, must have the knowledge about the blood group and RH factor, complete blood count, complete examination urine, blood sugar level आप random करा लें अगर उसकी history suggestive है. अगर history suggestive है तो then you even screen for the diabetes, you have to do certain tests, वो हम बाद में बात करेंगे. Then viral markers जिसके अंदर आप hepatitis B surface antigen, anti-HCV, फिर रूबेला एंटीबॉडीज, और अब इन दिस प्रेजेंट सेटअप कोरोना एंटीबॉडीज या कोविड एंटीबॉडीज, या इफ नीडेड सो RT-PCR आप इन्वेस्टिगेशंस में यू कैन ऑलवेज इंक्लूड. यूरिन में आपने क्या करना है, शुगर, कीटोन्स एंड प्रोटीन्स. और हीमोग्लोबिन की रेपिटेशन कब कब चाहिए? इफ इनिशियल हीमोग्लोबिन रीडिंग इज 11 gram and above, it should be repeated at 28 weeks. एंड अर्लियर अगर इनिशियल आपकी रिपोर्ट 9 ग्राम से कम हीमोग्लोबिन बता रही है, देन इट नीड्स रेपिटेशन एवरी 4 वीक्स, ऑब्वियसली आफ्टर इंटरवेंशन, यानी आपने उसको आयरन या वट एवर इज नीडेड, आयरन फॉलिक एसिड सप्लीमेंट दे दिया है, तो फिर आप उसको ज़रूर रिपीट कराएं देखने के लिए दैट इट इज़ स्टेबल, इट इज़ इम्प्रूविंग और इट इज़ नॉट इम्प्रूविंग और इट इज़ गोइंग डाउन। फिर डाउन सिंड्रोम स्क्रीनिंग। डाउन सिंड्रोम स्क्रीनिंग में कंबाइंड टेस्ट जिसके अंदर नकल ट्रांसल्यूसेंसी, बीटा ह्यूमन कोरियोनिक गोनाडोट्रोफिन, प्रेगनेंसी एसोसिएटेड प्लाज्मा प्रोटीन, it should be offered between 11 weeks to 13 weeks to 6 days. और वो ख़वातीन for women who book later in pregnancy. The most common, the most clinically and cost-effective serum screening test is triple or quadruple test. It can be offered between 15 weeks and 20 weeks. So this is the recommendation कि आपने डाउन सिंड्रोम स्क्रीनिंग, अब हम तो हर पेशेंट में नहीं कराते, बट WHO रेकमेंड्स कि आप करवाएं वेयर एवर इफ हिस्ट्री इज इंडिकेटेड, अगर फैमिली हिस्ट्री है फिर तो आप ज़रूर ही कराएं, और इफ देयर इज पास्ट हिस्ट्री ऑफ एबनॉर्मेलिटी देन डाउन सिंड्रोम स्क्रीनिंग मस्ट बी डन। एक तो मैंने बात की इसकी कंबाइंड टेस्ट की, बट इफ़ यू हैव द फैसिलिटी, बाकी चीज़ों की आपके पास नहीं है, तो एटलीस्ट यू कैन रिक्वेस्ट स्नोलॉजिस्ट फॉर द नकल ट्रांसल्यूसेंसी या उसकी थिकनेस आप मैयर करवा लें। So for women who book later in pregnancy, the most clinically and cost effective triple or quadruple test should be offered between 15 weeks and 20 weeks. So this means that we understand that this from the 11 weeks till 20 weeks Down syndrome screening can be done. और नकल फोल्ड थिकनेस आप करा लें, उससे भी आपको बहुत सारी या सॉफ्ट मार्कर्स अल्ट्रासाउंड के ऊपर you can always get some information. Now the high risk for GDM, as we know that GDM is quite common in our setup and Asians are especially बहुत ही susceptible हैं for the diabetes. So the risk factors क्या क्या हैं? You have to identify the risk factor for development of diabetes. If body mass index is above 30 kilogram per meter square, history of previous delivery of a baby weighing more than 4.5 kg, or in the past pregnancy there is history of gestational diabetes, or first degree relatives with the diabetes like mother, like aunts, uncles, or as I said that South Asians, they are more, they have found more susceptible to develop gestational diabetes. तो इसकी आपने स्क्रीनिंग ज़रूर करनी है. हाउ टू स्क्रीन, मैंने उसके ऊपर बहुत ज़्यादा डेलिब्रेट नहीं किया, लेकिन यू कैन स्टार्ट विद फास्टिंग एंड 1 hour पोस्ट पेरेंडियल, एंड देन वी कैन ऑलवेज गो टू ओरल ग्लूकोज टॉलरेंस टेस्ट आप वेयर ऑल दोज पेशेंट्स हु आर हाई रिस्क फॉर GDM. और अगर आपको ऑल्टर्ड इनिशियल ही मिल जाती हैं, देन यू कैन always go for 6 points record of the blood sugar levels, and then accordingly you can manage your patient. अब दूसरा आता है आप इसको कब रिपीट करें. So it can you can repeat it at 28 weeks अगर आपको इनिशियल आपकी चीज़ें नॉर्मल आ गई हैं. सो अल्ट्रासाउंड, इसके ऊपर भी बहुत कंट्रोवर्सी है. अल्ट्रासाउंड कब कराएं? 1 अल्ट्रासाउंड बिफोर 24 वीक्स इज रिकमेंडेड. एक ज़रूर करा लें. क्या करने के लिए? टू एस्टिमेट जेस्टेशनल एज, स्पेशली वेयर पेशेंट्स आर अनश्योर ऑफ डेट. सो आपका फर्स्ट ट्राइमेस्टर स्कैन विल बी मोर रिलायबल उसकी एक्सपेक्टेड डेट को कैलकुलेट करने के लिए. फॉर द डिटेक्शन ऑफ फीटल अनोमलीज, मल्टीपल जेस्टेशन and reduction of postpartum pregnancy, सो अल्ट्रासाउंड अगर आप अर्ली करा लेते हैं बिफोर 24 वीक्स और एज अर्ली एज पॉसिबल वंस यू हैव कंफर्म द फीटल हार्ट साउंड, उसके बाद विद इन एनॉमली स्कैन आप एक ज़रूर कराएं 18 टू 20 वीक्स के ऊपर। 18 to 20 weeks can detect majority of abnormalities और आप decide कर सकते हैं कि and you can counsel the couple accordingly। फिर हमारे patients का बहुत बड़ा concern होता है कि हम क्या खाएं। So we tell them that eat healthy. So besides eating healthy, they have to take supplements and 30 to 60 milligram of elemental iron per day with 400 microgram of folic acid should be prescribed. Similarly, daily calcium supplementation is required. बहुत सारी और अब ये नई जो चीज़ आई है, it reduces the risk of preeclampsia. So you can always stress upon the patient, especially जहाँ पे के past history of hypertension है, that they should not miss their calcium supplementation. So visits, जैसे visits की बात हुई कि क्या कहें, दरमियान में आ गया था कि आप 4 visits कराएं, but it is seen और सारी जो चीज़ें उन्होंने मैयर की, observations आई, so the perinatal and the fetal-maternal outcome, bonding between the caregivers and the pregnant women, it was not enough in the 4 visits. So again, minimum of 8 visits are recommended. Why? To reduce perinatal mortality and improve women's experience of care. जब आप 4 visits कहते हैं पूरे 9 month में, तो patient को लगता है that they feel that probably they are not taken care of appropriately, or it has affected the perinatal outcome as well. तो ये मैंने दोनों आपको दिखा दिए। WHO जो 4 विजिट्स का था स्केड्यूल और एंटीनेटल केयर मॉडल विच इज़ रिकमेंडेड नाउ, उसमें था विजिट जो फर्स्ट विजिट था बिटवीन 8 and 12 वीक्स में प्लान होना था, और इन द 8 मॉडल में अप टू 12 वीक्स आपने 1 विजिट करना था। देन इन सेकेंड ट्राइमेस्टर 2 विजिट्स, while in the 4 visits model में between 24 to 26 weeks सिर्फ 1 visit था, and then in third trimester they said that 2 visits कराएं 32 weeks and then 36 and 38 weeks के दरमियान में। But now it is recommended that in the first trimester 1 visit, in second trimester 2 visits, and then in third trimester more frequent visits are required. At 30 weeks, 34 weeks, then 36, 38 and 40, ये वही है जो हम पहले अपनी किताबों में पढ़ते थे कि then patient should be followed up 2 weekly, and patient should return for delivery if she has not given birth at 41 weeks or completed 40 weeks. It should not go beyond that. So on every visit, what to do? Besides the history and examination and reviewing her antenatal card, one has to consult the patient regarding diet, regarding follow-up visits, her investigations, जो कि repeat होनी, अगर आपको लग रहा है hemoglobin needs repetition, or you have given some intervention, it should be repeated. On the third trimester, patient is conscious about the mode of delivery, so one should be ready and one should be prepared कि मरीज को आप बताएं कि at what time, date, अगर आपने elective cesarean करना है तो the date should be given, mode of delivery should be discussed, anesthesia can be discussed, and the facilities available in the hospital like nursery if it is needed. So a lot of counseling is required in the थर्ड ट्राइमेस्टर, और इसी काउंसलिंग में आप पेशेंट को उसकी बता सकते हैं हाउ मच ही शुड वॉक, एक्सरसाइज एंड ऑल द साइंस ऑफ लेबर and where to report, when to report. So mode and time of delivery should be discussed on the antenatal period, and always sensitize patient about the contraception. जैसे हम गंगाराम में PPIUCD रख रहे हैं तो we take permission, we take consent, हम साइन करा लेते हैं कि अगर आप चाहें तो हम आपको PPIUCD या postpartum intrauterine contraceptive device or long-acting reversible contraception should be discussed during the antenatal period. So common ailments, बहुत सारी common ailments आ जाती हैं during pregnancy, and these should be sorted out. और patient को आप, you can always, as a clinician, you can guide your patient that this is you are going to have all this. इससे आपने how to manage that. कॉमन क्या आती है? नोजिया एंड वॉमिटिंग, जो आप उसको हर्बल लाइक जिंजर आप कह सकते हैं, विटामिन B6 दे सकते हैं. Then heartburn is a common complaint. This can be improved by giving appropriate advice on diet and lifestyle. Similarly, antacid preparations आप बता सकते हैं patient को. Then leg cramps, another very important aspect, और बहुत सारे patient complain करते हैं leg cramps की. So we can give magnesium, calcium, or other non-pharmacological treatment options for leg cramps. You can advise. Or low back, pelvic pain is also an important complaint. So you can counsel them about exercise and physiotherapy, sports, and acupuncture भी दुनिया में होता है, हम तो यहाँ पे यूज़ नहीं करते. Then constipation is another common ailment. उसमें आप patient को fiber supplements and you can tell them. And similarly, varicose veins and edema. So all these are common complaints which needs to be addressed. और बड़े आराम से आप patient को guide कर सकते हैं. So this is all in the antenatal care, and with the simple measures and the continuous support, and with the risk categorization, one can improve fetal-maternal outcome, one can decrease perinatal mortality. अगर आपको लग रहा है patient is high risk, you can even counsel them to go to tertiary care setup, ताकि वहाँ पे more facilities for the investigations, for the management are available. And so this is the time where patient can be provided guidance, patient can be provided support, and so this experience should be a pleasant experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shamsa, for a very enlightening lecture. And it was very nice to see the latest WHO guidelines and recommendations. And I'm sure all our listeners are have lots of questions and comments, and they can inbox their comments and or any questions, while I'll ask the chairs to give their comments before we move on to the next presentation. So अगर हमारी दूसरी chair मौजूद हैं, Homa, would you like to interact with us and give your comments while we are waiting for Roshan to join us?
Huma is not here.
Okay, we'll ask Farida. Farida, अगर आप कोई comment देना चाहें?
Yes, she has given very nicely, Dr. Professor Shamsa Humayun, on the antenatal care. So there's a recommendation and the current recommendation, how and how much we have to evaluate. So there's an improvement. Our is in this. She have very much elaboration and various topic they have to cover it. But we have enforced on the essential physical resources, and also that we have to see that the medicine is available there or not, and also the who are skilled birth attendant, they are attending there, they identify the woman's risk factor, and during they have the babies inside, so there's any risk to that baby, also they have to evaluate that. So with this we have to also, one supervision courses also we do, that we are attending those birth attendants that have the skill on this, so they can identify and they give the basic needs and the basic health units. And also we have to look for there's the status of the fetus during their antenatal care, and they do the essential their intervention, and she has also covered the good over the counseling. So the counseling is a very much important for that. They issue also there's a hygiene, health diets, and also there's a birth spacing. All these she has that clearly. So all these cover all these topics. So it's a very nice, and this will be help to all others. And we by this doing good antenatal care and identify risk factor, So we reduce the maternal mortality and the morbidity. Thank you.
Thank you, Farida, for your useful comments. I'll now request Professor Sadakat Jabin for her comments or any queries.
Thank you very much, SOGP and Sami, and also Batul for giving me the opportunity to talk on this and give it the comments. First of all, I thank Dr. Shamsa for very comprehensive and sensitive topic in a very simple and understandable way. Actually, when we compare the antenatal care with the developed countries, we are lacking behind very important issue. That's why our maternal mortality and morbidity rate is very high. I mean, we have problem with the implementation of the model antenatal care, the guidelines, the resources, the education of the women, as well as the patient-centered care. Patient-centered care is very important unless and until we involve the patient in the management of herself. It's not easy to improve the health of the women. Second thing is that we are still lagging behind the proper health care system in our country, like starting from primary care to the tertiary level. We have got lots of LHPs, LHWs, but they are not doing their work properly. Where we need that, we should screen the patient at the primary level, and we should, there should be referral system from primary to secondary and tertiary level hospitals. We are facing the loads of primary and secondary level care. That's why we are overburdened in tertiary hospital. We are not doing what we want to do, like in the way of research as well as management of the high risk patients. So it's very important that primary level care, there be screening process, the secondary care, there should be a proper system for reference. And at the tertiary level care, what we need is the development of high risk clinic, higher antenatal diagnostic center, as well as good neonatology care. Unless until we don't have these triad of the important facilities, our antenatal care as well as the neonatal care will not be improved even at the tertiary level hospital. So we have to work hard for it to implement all these guidelines and implementation of the good care of the mother as well as the baby at each level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sadakat. Thank you so much. If we have any of the chairs who have returned, then we can take their comments. Otherwise, I'll move to the next presentation.
Well, I am here, Batul.
Ji, please, Roshan, we would like you to give us some comments related to Shamsa's presentation, a very important one related to antenatal care, where we need to do a lot of work, and your input would be much appreciated, madam.
Well, I have heard a few of the slides from Shamsa, and I had to leave in between because I am busy in MCPS exam. So I have missed the latter part of the Shamsa's presentation, but I heard the comments of others. What I want to add up here is that we have to follow the at least 4 visits which have been recommended, but still I feel that people are not even going for 4 visits antenatally, most of us. The lay population and the public is not knowing the proper way of antenatal care. So for that matter, this is a good topic. At least we have covered the basic areas. And I feel if the visits are increased to 7 or 8, that will be better. We will be better saving the mothers and the babies. Plus the nutrition and naturally diet and all other aspects of the care must be thought about, and in the present situation of COVID, naturally the need of antenatal care in this present time is even more. So we have to emphasize, and I am grateful to SOGP and Shamsa Humayun for a very elaborate presentation. I hope I would be able to attend Sadia's presentation in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Roshan, and thank you all the chairs for your nice comments. Dr. Roshan, अब नया उन्होंने change करके 8 visits कर दिए हैं because 4 visits were very insufficient. So very valid suggestion from your side. अब latest recommendations यही हैं कि आप 8 visits ही कराएं.
जी हाँ, ये जरूरी है, बिल्कुल सही है. Exactly.
Thank you, Shamsa. Thank you, Roshan. So now we'll move on to our next speaker.
Batul, is there a place for a comment? I'm Dr. Samina.
Please, Samina, आप comment दे दें, उसके बाद हम next पे move करेंगे, please.
Ji, Batul, thank you very much, Sami and Batul and Shamsa, all the chairs, thank you very much. I'm Dr. Samina Haq from Faisalabad. Batul, an excellent presentation, but we have to put our heads together and think कि हम ये सारी recommendations देते हैं, इतने webinars, seminars, conferences करते हैं, but the maternal mortality is not going down, it's rising. So we have to find out what is lacking. What is lacking? We have to put our heads together, work for it, and at least decrease it to some extent. So this is my concern. और आप सब बहुत learned लोग हैं, teaching में हैं, सब हैं. So we have to find out the exact cause. That's my comment.
Thank you, Samina. Very valid input, because it is very heartbreaking. All of us, we are so we are very privileged. We are very highly accomplished gynecologists and doctors available, but the coordinated antenatal care is not functional. The primary and secondary setups remain limited. And that is why the topic of Shamsa's presentation was highlighting that we need to be sure who provides antenatal care. Is it the LHB, the doctor or MBBS doctor or the gynecologist? Where it is provided. If it's going to be provided in the tertiary hospital, then the system has failed. It has to be provided at various levels by various health cadres. And how it is provided, again, we have to do retraining of people to ensure it is well done, and all the 8 antenatal visits have to be coordinated. And we
I endorse your comment that it has to be a collaborated work, including everybody जो उसके stakeholders हैं, सबको collaboration कैसे कराएंगे मुझे तो नहीं समझ में आती. End of the conference.
I'll just, because this is a webinar, I'll just give one comment that as we are very privileged that most of the chairs are the chairpersons of their individual chapters. We have our president, Dr. Razia Kurejo, on board. And what we are trying in the Rawalpindi Islamabad chapter, we've made a new initiative. We are mapping our GPs who are practicing OBGYN. We are not involved in the government of Pakistan because that is a big bureaucratic challenge. We keep writing to the government to be on board, but I think the time has come that the society and we as senior gynecologists should take some responsibility for our individual areas and try to do little initiatives. And if we do that in collaboration across Pakistan, who knows, we can make a difference. We can't keep blaming the government of Pakistan or the system or the lack of primary care and keep blaming it for 50 years. Now, the time has come where we should try and do at individual level, and that's a big webinar to be done later. So it is my privilege.
Batul, that's a great message, and I think we should start doing this. That's
absolutely.
A great initiative.
So that is the little things we can do, but this is beyond the subject of this webinar. So it is my privilege and honor to introduce Dr. Sadia Ahsan Paul, who's going to talk about anemia in pregnancy, tip and management options. Professor Sadia Ahsan Paul is a consultant gynecologist in OMI Hospital, Karachi. She is a professor of OBGYN, vice president of SOGP. She's member editorial board of JPMA, and I'm sure she has lots of hats, and she's been very limited in giving her intro. And I think she has been the organizer of the SOGP congresses, and she's been one of the most vibrant persons in the various training programs on contraception and emergency obstetric care. So I want to thank Dr. Sadia for taking this time off to talk to us about anemia in pregnant women. Please, Sadia, proceed with your presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Batul, for your kind introduction. I will request for my first slide to be shared, please, Dr. Halima. So as we know, the majority na kahe to at least half of Pakistani women would be found to be anemic if we started testing everybody. So this is a real issue because when they get pregnant, it adds to the complications of pregnancy. So the prevalence of the types of anemia is that, can we go back, please? Yeah, that 60% are hypochromic microcytic, which is mostly iron deficiency anemia and thalassemia. And 34% are normochromic normocytic, and 6% are macrocytic. Next. So in normal pregnancy, there is 50% increase in plasma volume. There's a fall in the hematocrit and red blood cell count. The mean corpuscular volume and the mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration, however, remains unchanged. There's usually a decrease in platelet count and 2 to 3 times increase in iron requirement. There's a 10 to 20 times increase in the folate requirement, and pregnancy, as we all know, is a hypercoagulable state. So iron deficiency anemia is one of the most common nutritional deficiencies. 4 to 5 billion people have iron deficiency, 2 billion have anemia, 1 billion have iron deficiency anemia. The prevalence is highest amongst pregnant women, about 45%, and children under 5 years is 49%. Next, please. Other causes are folic acid deficiency, which causes a megaloblastic anemia, and this is also associated with the intake of anticonvulsant drugs, folate antagonists, and other hematological conditions. And of course, there's hemolytic anemia, thalassemia, which is quite prevalent in Pakistan, especially due to cousin marriages and lack of testing prior to marriage. And so what are the contributing factors? Yeah, sickle cell disease is rarer in Pakistan. And can we go back to the previous slide, please? The previous slide, please. Okay, so factors contributing towards the iron deficiency anemia are, of course, poor diet, menstruation, especially if they are heavy, high consumption of cereals, legumes, and plant-based diets, as these do interfere with iron absorption from the gut. And early marriage, which is also prevalent in Pakistan, low literacy rate, and lack of guidance towards family planning, poor socioeconomic conditions. Transfer of iron from the mother to the fetus is supported by a substantial increase in maternal iron absorption during pregnancy. The serum ferritin usually falls markedly between 12 and 25 weeks of gestation, and most iron transfer to the fetus occurs after the 30th week of gestation, which corresponds to the time of peak efficiency of maternal iron absorption. The most common symptoms of any type of anemia is fatigue. And the signs of iron deficiency anemia are a pale skin, cracks on the sides of the mouth, swelling or soreness of the tongue, brittle nails, or spooning of the nails. And amongst the symptoms can be chest pain, dizziness, weakness, cold hand and feet, pica, shortness of breath. So amongst the consequences can be preterm birth, maternal anemia, as we know, and puerperal sepsis and low birth weight. There's increased risk of maternal and perinatal mortality and morbidity. Pregnant women, in particularly, there's reduced ability to survive bleeding during and after childbirth, which is PPH, and premature and low birth weight infants. Next, please. As you know, in Pakistan, this is in the last demographic health survey that we had a breakup of maternal mortality. The next one is going to be analyzed very soon and published soon. The leading cause is PPH. Nearly 30%. And after that is sepsis and other causes. So PPH is the major killer still. In 90% of PPH cases, there are no risk factors. And the estimated amounts of blood loss are notoriously low. often half the actual loss is estimated. The lower the hemoglobin level, the poorer is the woman's tolerance of blood loss. Next. So who is at risk? Women with an overdistended uterus, as we all know, prolonged labor, antepartum hemorrhage, severe preeclampsia and eclampsia, intrauterine death over a long time, and anemia is an independent risk factor. The other thing that we obstetricians are often faced with is operations, having to operate on women who are anemic and needing an emergency surgery like C-section, and even other procedures may have to be undertaken. So women who have preoperative anemia, it is associated with a 22% longer hospital stay, 3.75% higher probability of kidney injury, 5 times increased risk of blood transfusions. There's a 1.9, nearly 2% higher probability of infection and a nearly 3% higher probability of mortality. A patient-centered, multi-professional, multidisciplinary, and multimodal approach is needed for the optimal management of anemia and hemostasis to limit blood transfusion in the perioperative period, to optimize the red cell mass, to minimize the blood loss, and to harness and optimize physiological reserve of anemia. Normal HP doesn't mean that iron deficiency doesn't exist. Hemoglobin is not a sensitive indicator of iron deficiency anemia, as it depletes in the last and repletes first. Therapy should be continued for at least 3 months after hemoglobin has become normal to replenish the iron stores. So proven interventions to prevent iron deficiency anemia are universal supplementation of pregnant women with daily oral iron and folic acid tablets, control of malaria, control of hookworms, optimal birth spacing, and improve iron stores of adolescents with iron folic acid supplements. Universal proven interventions include, so for every $1 spent on iron supplementation, there's a return of $24 in decreased disability and increased wages over a woman's lifetime. So we have to classify the anemia according to its severity. And as you can see, the recent meta-analyses show that correcting anemia of any severity reduces the risk of death. The risk of maternal mortality decreases by 20% for each 1 gram per deciliter increase in hemoglobin. The majority of pregnant women have hemoglobin between 7 and 12 grams, while relatively few have severe anemia. And very severe anemia, which is less than 5 grams. So severe anemia is a hemoglobin less than 7 grams per DL. And you need to, if a woman is diagnosed to have this, you need to revise the birth plan so as to deliver in a facility with blood transfusion services. So if she's being managed in the community, that is wrong. Give a double dose of iron, 1 tablet twice daily for 3 months. Counsel on compliance with treatment, give oral antimalarial where appropriate. Follow up in 2 weeks to check clinical progress, test results, and compliance with treatment, and refer urgently to the hospital. Moderate anemia is between 7 to 11 grams per deciliter, and the woman, if you have no way of testing, you can see the palmar and conjunctival pallor. So you need to give her a double dose of iron, which is 1 tablet twice daily for 3 months. Counsel on compliance with treatment, give appropriate oral antimalarial if not given in the past month. Reassess at next antenatal visit, 4 to 6 weeks. And if anemia persists, refer her to hospital. Give parenteral iron. If there's no clinical anemia, which is hemoglobin more than 11 grams, there will be no pallor. Give iron 1 tablet once daily, meaning in the prophylactic dose, which is 60 milligram of elemental iron and 400 micrograms of folic acid. Counsel on compliance with treatment. Now, when we give oral iron, you must also instruct the woman to take it either 1 hour before meals on an empty stomach or 2 hours after meals, because the meal contents will interfere with iron absorption. And the iron has to be in the ferrous form, not the ferric form. And you need to give dietary advice as to what kind of food is rich in iron. There's a general misconception, GK, spinach, yeah, palak, and is a very, because of Popeye the Sailor, but most of the iron in vegetables is, and fruits like apples, is available in ferric form, not ferrous form. So it is not absorbed mostly. The best source would be for best absorption would be red meat and liver. But liver we cannot advise to overeat, but can you go back on the slide, please? But we must advise on meat consumption if they can afford it. So there are proven interventions to prevent iron deficiency anemia. This is universal supplementation, control of malaria, control of hookworms. They are prevalent in the area. Optimal birth spacing, 2 to 3 years at least. So we must not forget that very important counseling lesson that we have to give our women. Improve iron stores of adolescents with iron and folic acid supplements. Next, please. So this will also help reduce maternal mortality. So this is one of the simple things that can be done. This was done in Cambodia, where women would not take tablets or are resistant to take medicines. And the same situation is prevalent in Pakistan. So what they did was, as a public health measure, this is commercially available. They called it a lucky iron fish, a blob of iron, solid piece of iron shaped like a fish, because fish is a popular food in Cambodia, and they instructed the public to add it to their handi, their daily, salan, let's say, whatever dish that they are making for themselves, their main course, they add it to that, and it just gets added to the soup or the gravy, and it becomes enriched with iron. And this helps prevent on a massive scale iron deficiency anemia. We can easily do this in Pakistan, and we should. So treatment, the main sites of absorption for iron are the duodenum and jejunum, acid secretions of the stomach, and some dietary acids, for example, ascorbic acid, aid absorption. The better absorbed when the iron is in the ferrous state. Oral iron is the preferred route, as soluble ferrous salts, which are better absorbed than ferric salts. Dose is 100 to 200 milligram of iron daily. Prophylactic dose is 60 to 120 milligram of iron daily, and therapy is generally continued until HB reaches normal values, and then for a further 3 months, which we all forget, or more, to restore body iron stores. So the treatment when the hemoglobin is increased, whenever you give treatment, whether it's oral or parenteral meaning IM or IV, it's hardly IM anymore. We're mostly giving IV and infusions. It takes about a week for 1 gram raise. It makes no difference whether you're giving oral or iron. But compounds like ferric carboxymaltose or iron sucrose infusion prior to delivery, C-section, increases hemoglobin levels much more efficiently, and significantly in women presenting with iron deficiency anemia relatively late in pregnancy. Administration is safe and effective in 2nd and 3rd trimesters. Next. The safety and efficacy of parenteral iron it's quite proven now. We've been using it for more than a decade now, and the advantages are its shorter treatment period, better compliance, rapid normalization of iron storage, low incidence of gastrointestinal side effects, especially for women who cannot tolerate oral iron. So the normal HB doesn't mean that iron deficiency doesn't exist. HP is not a sensitive indicator of iron deficiency anemia as it depletes in the last and repeats first. Therapy should be continued for 3 months after HP has become normal to replenish the iron stores. Next, please. So these are evidence-based interventions to reduce maternal mortality. So PPH can be reduced by antenatal treatment of anemia and active management of third stage of labor. And as you can see, all these conditions, for example, eclampsia, you can treat with or prevent with good antenatal care that Dr. Shamsa talked about, and giving magnesium sulfate for fits. And abortions can be reduced by good family planning and post-abortion care. And iatrogenic cases can be reduced by improved skills of healthcare professionals. Puerperal sepsis can be reduced by clean delivery, antibiotics, tetanus toxoid immunization. And now we have the Tdap, which is a combination vaccination, which should be given to women instead of just the tetanus toxoid. Other, like obstructed labor, can be prevented with a partogram. Next, please. Keep clicking, please. And of course, iron supplements, hepatitis awareness, vaccination, malaria prevention, all this can be done in the antenatal period, but this is dependent on functioning health systems, well-equipped, skilled providers, and hospitals. So let's do a few case studies. The first one is a 25-year-old, 12 weeks pregnant primary gravida on routine tests at booking is found to have a hemoglobin of 7.5 grams. The complete picture shows a microcytic anemia. What is your differential diagnosis? How would family history help in the diagnosis? What other tests would you order? So in the differential diagnosis, Halima, can you move to the next slide, please? Yeah, so which tests would we, I mean, you can, most common is iron deficiency. So a single test like serum ferritin it reflects the body stores as well and is helpful. HP electrophoresis to exclude thalassemia minor, and depending on what the other cells look like in the blood picture, bone marrow biopsy may be indicated if we're suspecting leukemias, and serum total iron binding capacity if required. Next. But we don't routinely do a bone marrow biopsy, so please don't do that. If this patient has thalassemia minor, the most appropriate treatment is, which one would we choose? So obviously it's oral iron and folic acid. We don't need to give her a blood transfusion. We just giving oral folic acid is not a choice, and intravenous iron total dose infusion is definitely not required. Next, please. Not indicated. So if this is confirmed iron deficiency anemia, the appropriate treatment is one of the four: intravenous iron sorbitol infusion, oral folic acid, oral iron and folic acid, and blood transfusion. So which one would you choose? I think I would choose oral iron and folic acid. Next, please. In case number 2, we have a patient who was admitted in labor room with a full-term pregnancy and bleeding PV at home since 12 hours. The patient was dyspneic, restless, and the hemoglobin on investigation was found to be 2 grams. That's bad. Next, please. She's symptomatic as well. So most common cause of antepartum hemorrhage would could be any of these actually: placenta previa, uterine rupture, vaginal lacerations, fetal chorionic vessel rupture. So next, please. The most accurate means of diagnosing the cause of a third trimester bleeding is a Number one, coagulation profile, pelvic examination, abdominal examination, and ultrasonography. So which one would we do? Of course, it has to be the ultrasound to exclude placenta previa. Next, please. So approximately 1,000 milligram of additional iron is required during pregnancy to meet which of the following needs? Expanded maternal cell blood mass during pregnancy, for fetal hemoglobin, 3 for iron loss through bleeding at the time of delivery, 4 all of the above. Yes, I think we need it for all of the above. Next, please. Next. So this would be the last case I would discuss. This is a case study of a 21-year-old third gravida, para 1+1, who is 12 weeks pregnant. She presents in the emergency department with shortness of breath and chest pain. This is a fairly common scenario, and we obstetricians often deal with it and manage it in a fairly cool manner. But for those who are not obstetricians, who are dealing with a pregnant woman with such symptoms, it is quite, scary for them. So 1 week ago, she felt faint with shortness of breath on minimal exertion and then even at rest. She had chest pain, which started today while she was sitting without any apparent provocation, right-sided sharp with no radiation. She has had 1 live birth, a normal delivery, and 1 spontaneous abortion. Her last pregnancy was full term with no complications. Next. So she's had no prenatal care so far in the current pregnancy, on no medication and unable to maintain adequate nutrition because of persistent emesis 2 to 3 times daily, has lost 20 pounds over the past 12 weeks, no close contacts who are sick, no fever, diarrhea, dysuria, urinary frequency or urgency, palpitations, swelling of the legs or feet, blurry vision, or increase in neck girth. So does not smoke or use alcohol or illicit substances. She had laser assisted keratoplasty in about 5 years back. She's allergic to seafood, not eaten at any new places recently, up to date with her childhood vaccinations, no family history of hypercoagulability or venous thrombotic events. Next slide, please. So when you examine her on physical examination, she's breathing rapidly, 45 breaths per minute. Temperature is 37 degrees. Pulse 100 at 2. She's tachycardic. Blood pressure is 95 by 60. Weight is 55.9 kilograms. Oxygen saturation is 100% while on 10 liters of oxygen using a non-rebreather mask. She's alert, oriented, and comfortable. No jugular venous distension, neck mass, or thyromegaly. Lungs are clear on auscultation with no wheezes or rales. The cardiovascular examination is normal. There's regular heart rate and rhythm, normal S1 and S2 sounds, no rubs, clicks, or murmurs. Pulses in the extremities are normal, and she has no peripheral edema. Neurologic examination is normal. Her ECG shows sinus tachycardia with first degree AV block. The differential diagnosis at this point, which is the most probable cause of her symptoms. Let's see what it can be. Yeah, can you click please? So pulmonary embolism is the first thing that comes to mind, peripartum cardiomyopathy, acute coronary syndrome, aortic dissection, expected physiological changes of pregnancy. Next. So all these things come to mind. So pulmonary embolism would be the most probable diagnosis given the patient's pregnancy, shortness of breath, and tachycardia, and the pleuritic quality of her chest pain. Peripartum cardiomyopathy is also a possible cause as it may present with profound shortness of breath and markedly decreased cardiac function. But it is much less likely in this patient because she is in early pregnancy. And peripartum cardiomyopathy usually is seen during the last month of gestation or the first months after delivery. Acute coronary syndrome is unlikely given her young age and the lack of significant risk factors or a supporting history. Aortic dissection is unlikely in view of her medical history. Next, please. Physiological changes of pregnancy. Many pregnant women experience a sensation of not being able to catch their breath or expand their lungs fully, as the diaphragm is limited by the gravid abdomen. They present with dyspnea, fatigue, reduced exercise capacity, peripheral edema, or volume overload. These changes occur gradually and worsen over time. This patient's degree of shortness of breath and sudden onset do not seem like normal physiological changes of pregnancy. Other possible causes can be asthma, and it should be considered in anyone with a history of wheezing, cough, and dyspnea. Pleural empyema, pneumonia, fever, and sputum production would support a diagnosis. Severe anemia can also give these symptoms, and maternal heart disease, for example, endocarditis, pulmonary hypertension, complicates about 0.2 to 3% of pregnancy. So that is the end of my presentation. In the short time, I tried to cover mostly whatever I could. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sadia. It was an elaborate presentation, and the last part was very interesting with the case discussions, and it just revised the whole presentation. Thank you so much, Sadia. Now I would request our chairs for their comments. If Dr. Huma Qudusi is here, she missed out with the last comment, so we'll welcome her remarks first. Roshan, would you like to comment?
Yes, of course, Batul. Well, Dr. Sadia, I heard your presentation. It was very elaborate, nicely completed, and the case studies were very interesting. And I think there must be a lot of questions in the mind of the audience who heard about, and there may be a long discussion starts all with these cases. But what I was feeling that if we are adding few guidelines in this type of the presentations, like I just have gone through the FIGO guidelines regarding the anemia and pregnancy, and adding up, and in my own practice, I add if hemoglobin is less than 11, and many times if I am doing serum ferritin and I found it deficient. So the question is that once we are doing hemoglobin or CBC for every patient at the booking visit in the first trimester especially, or any time when the patient comes, and we are doing the serum ferritin together, it will be very easy to decide that which patient really needs oral iron, and if they are non-compliant to oral iron, even early parenteral iron can be added up in the if they are even having ferritin less than 20, then even in the early second trimester, parenteral iron can be added up. I hope Batul may have some comment, and you might have some comment about it, that we are adding the serum ferritin perhaps in a population who comes to us in the private clinics, or even those people who are coming in general public hospitals, if they are affording enough to have 200, 300 rupees, a simple test of serum ferritin done along with CBC, because hemoglobin is no more a very sensitive indicator for the iron reserves in pregnancy, and serum ferritin is added up, and then we are emphasizing for doubling the dose of iron, as you have mentioned. And if serum ferritin is more than 20 and we are leaving them, and the hemoglobin is more than 12, even if they are left over with no iron, oral iron, even in up to the second trimester, then we will be covering our population in a better way.
नसीम,
And then
ये नहीं इस्तेमाल
postnatal
करने, ये पूरे
period,
सेट के साथ है, ये नहीं
postnatal
यूज करने,
period, if we are
नाम नहीं यूज करने, ये तो मेरे सेट के साथ है, ये मैं बिछाती हूँ.
as you mentioned genuinely that they should have a family planning and a inter-pregnancy interval 2 to 3 years, that has to be emphasized, and they have to cover themselves with the oral iron. One thing about the nutrition, as you said, that spinach and other dietary things like vegetables and fruits, especially apples, are not having ferrous. But I think if they are eaten freshly, then they are having ferrous content. But once they are exposed to the air for a longer time, then ferrous is converted to ferric, and then absorption is not very good. So there is a lot to speak about the iron deficiency anemia in our population, and then safe drinking water, boiled water, avoidance of the worm infestation and indigestion problems. They all are the contributing factors in the development of anemia. Anyway, your presentation was wonderful, and everything is good. So I think the message was well taken by the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan, for very valuable comments. Or it's nice. In a world where everybody could afford, ferritin would be very nice in added to our initial screening tests. But naturally, I think affordability remains a problem, and I think we are all doing blood CP. And we've had hematologist colleagues giving with different formulas where you can, the hematocrit, MCH, and then the MCHC, divide, multiply ratios. And with those ratios, you can predict iron deficiency very accurately. So I think that is another option, that we look into the blood CP closely, and where patients cannot afford ferritin, and if there is choice between ferritin and buying injectable iron, and if the formula helps me, I might even go for a formula and do that as an indirect evidence of iron deficiency. So I don't think with poverty and limited resources, we are cutting costs, and where affordable, serum ferritin and hemoglobin electrophoresis should be considered in the screening test of women. So thank you so much for Professor Roshan Ara for excellent suggestions. And I will now request Dr. Professor Sadakat Jabin for her input.
Thank you, Saida. First of all, I will appreciate the talk of Dr. Sadia. It was very comprehensive and elaborated on the causes and the types of anemia and treatment, and supplemented by very interesting scenarios. I will add a few comments. First is that we have got our own guidelines which were made in the by the last SOGP group, and it has been displayed on the website of SOGP. So that those guidelines were formulated according to needs of our local problems. So I will request all the members to see and those guidelines, and we can get many help in the management of these patients. Second, I also second Dr. Roshan that serum ferritin, though it is not it is cost effective, because iron deficiency is displayed by ferritin. Even if the anemia is not there, iron deficiency will be detected by doing serum ferritin level. Moreover, in cases of in our setup, in our province, we are getting more patients with thalassemia minor trait. Day by day, I am seeing the patient with this problem. So it is better that if we do the full blood count and we see that there is microcytic microcytic anemia, we should do serum ferritin level, because in those cases where there's iron overload, we can't give parenteral or oral iron to these patients. So that will be also helpful in the management of patient with thalassemia minor trait. Second is that the compliance is very poor in our setup with the oral iron. I have experience of the patients. I'm giving the patient for the iron for 2 or 3 months, but I am not getting the adequate response of increase in Ig. The reason might be poor compliance, side effects, and moreover, the patients are taking calcium along with the iron. It's our trend that we are prescribing calcium and the iron to the patient. So they take simultaneously these, prescriptions, and then we know that the calcium affects the absorption of iron. So we should advise the patient that there should be space between these two drugs. So my comment that, or recommendation that we should do serum ferritin level in all the patient will be seen, whereas microcytic hypochromic anemia. So we'll be able to differentiate between iron deficiency anemia and thalassemia. Thank you very much.
for your useful comments. We'll now ask Professor Farida Begum for her remarks.
Thank you. Very nicely, she presented Professor Sadia Ahsanpal about the anemia, the tips and the management option. She gave the very much elaborative about that, how they take the meal, diet, and they have to divided doses, the iron, and also the counsel about that after delivery, they have to restore her iron store. So not stop the treatment after the delivery. They have also the postnatal care. And the reason for that is creating this anemia, because in our countries also anemia is more common, more than 60%. So we have to treat the risk factor that is causing the anemia. That is the diet, there's a birth spacing required, and also there's a postnatal treatment option. And she have also with the very much cases that is shows that the every view of that we have to elaborate the management option, and that way she has given. So very nicely presented by the Professor Sadia Ahsanpal. Thank you.
Please do.
I'm Dr. Samina from Faisalabad. Sadia, number one,
This
I
platform.
have seen a few cases from coming with iron overload, because IV iron itne zyada ab lag rahe hain in our peripheries. The TVAs, the nurses, they're all giving loads and loads of IV iron without any supervision. So I have come across a lot of patients who are coming with iron overload. Ek ye concern hai. Second concern is that we have to keep a balance between the things. हमने बहुत ज़्यादा इसको over advertise कर दिया है, तो कैसे हमने इसको एक balance achieve करना है? My second comment is on a case presented by you in which you said that she was, I think, 15 weeks pregnant and she had a 7 hemoglobin. So you chose oral iron. Sadia, my concern is that initial pregnancy में oral iron say nausea, vomiting, indigestion अगर हो तो will it be possible for her to carry on with oral iron? अगर हम उसको एक blood दे दें और एक IV iron दे दें और बाकी she can carry on with oral if she can. So I just wanted your comment on that.
Thank you, Dr. Samina. Your comments are very valid. Now, I'll answer the second one first. I'm very much against any parenteral administration of any drug, whether pregnant or not pregnant, unless oral fails. So, and blood is the last resort. Now, since she's in early pregnancy, we have time. She's just, she was 12 weeks pregnant, I think. So even if she's unable to tolerate the oral iron, now there's so many forms of oral iron. There's ferrous sulfate, there's ferrous fumarate, and they are available in tablet and syrup form. So and there are very palatable sachets as well. So which I've tried myself actually, and it was very tasty. So it's a matter of trying one or the other till one product which the woman can tolerate. And if she cannot tolerate, then IV sucrose or ferric subsulfate, that would be the last resort. Because let's not forget the parenteral drug, any parenteral drug can give rise to a reaction which can be life-threatening. And we have had seen cases even in Karachi where a doctor administered IV iron to his wife, his pregnant wife, and she had a reaction and she actually died by the time he brought her to hospital. So I'm very, very careful about giving parenteral any drug. So if oral, and remember I showed it in my slide also that the change in the hemoglobin concentration is around 1 gram per week. So that's how much time you have, whether you give it orally or parenterally. And as Dr. Sadakat mentioned, when we are giving drugs, we often fail to give the advice कि जी आपने दवा like for iron, it should be on on an empty stomach, 1 hour before meals or 2 hours after a meal for best absorption. तो ये अगर हम instructions नहीं दे रहे, and then often like she mentioned, the calcium and other multivitamins are combined or taken with the meal. So that is not a good thing. So vitamin D and calcium are best taken with meals at another time of the day, and iron should be taken at another time of the day with another meal. If we take some time out and give instructions properly, and I've recently seen a woman who had thalassemia minor, and nobody had done her electrophoresis, and she's pregnant, she had already received like 7 transfusions of IV iron sucrose. 7, not even the recommended maximum of 3. So yes, it is being abused. You're right.
Thank you, Sadia और Samina. अगर हमारे कोई और डॉक्टर शम्सा कोई कमेंट देना चाहें या हुमा अगर मौजूद हैं वो देना चाहें, they are welcome, and then we can ask Halima to wind up, and perhaps we could be looking forward to seeing Professor Razia Corejo's video if that glitch has been sorted as well.
Thank you, Batul. I just wanted to add. Yeah, I'm sorry. I would like to first apologize. I was absent for a while because we have a FCPS Part 2 course going on in my unit at the moment. And in fact, Dr. Shamsa is also here in Multan for the course. So I was away for a while during the webinar. I do understand that in the third world, and especially in the country like Pakistan, and it's multifactorial. It's not only a matter of being iron deficient. There are so many other factors that contribute to anemia. It's the compliance, it's the absorption, and it's the hygiene and so many other things that they all contribute. But in the long that women do need iron supplements, not only while they are pregnant, but they need iron supplements as well, otherwise as well. It's not only being, getting iron supplements in pregnancy. It's, I believe that they do need it at other times as well. And there are so many other contributing factors which contribute to anemia. It's not only the replacement of iron. So we have to kind of educate our women and our masses for many other things, like regarding hygiene, for example, like the supply of clean water, like contraception, child spacing, and so many other things that contribute. But at the end of the day, they do need iron supplements. As far as the screening is concerned, as Dr. Batul said, that probably we cannot go into very hi-fi kind of testing, and probably still we are focusing on blood count that can give us a lot of information about the underlying cause. And since we are coming across a lot of people, a lot of couples with thalassemia, we should always keep that at the back of our minds, because iron overload and iron replacements don't go side by side. You have to be very careful about iron overload. So probably in those circumstances where we are not getting adequate response despite iron replacement, that would be an indication to go for serum ferritin levels in these women. But generally speaking, probably the first test would be a full blood count. I was also a member of the guideline committee of the SOGP, which had actually made these local guidelines for our women in pregnancy and in the postpartum period. So talking about hemoglobins like 7 grams in the postnatal period also, probably blood is not a choice. And we can still go on other methods of iron replacement. And I absolutely agree with Dr. Sadia Paul that you need to be very careful while you're giving parenteral treatment.
Thank you, Huma. Thank you, all the chairs. Thank you, SOGP. Thank you, Sami Pharma. Thank you, Orbit. We've had a very nice session. Dr. Shamsa and Dr. Sadia were really very, very crisp, and we had excellent presentations. And I feel very sorry that it wasn't shared live on the Facebook. And I hope more and more people can benefit from this activity. I would now like to hand over this session to Halima if she wants to wind it up. Otherwise, we are done with the webinar. Thank you so much, all of you.